So that's where most people will stop. I'm going to show you now, if you wanted to make it a little bit more reliable, sometimes this optical sensor, as I said, is susceptible to cobwebs or things like that. And it does have the ability to work with a hardwired sensor. So let me show you how that works. Okay, so I installed this heavy-duty contact sensor at the bottom of my garage just to make it a little bit more reliable to know when the garage is fully closed. And I was fortunate that whoever installed the garage door in this house used Cat6 cable for these safety beam sensors. So there were a number of wire leads that were unused from that Cat6 or Cat5 pair. So I just tapped into that because it's already running up through the ceiling into the garage. This is just a contact sensor, and then you see on the bottom of the garage, but I pull around here. There's a magnet installed on the bottom, and so when this garage comes down and the magnet touches the sensor, then that acts as basically like a closure to know if the garage is open or closed. So let me show you how that's wired up to the garage opener. The Cat6 cable or Cat5 cable that was wired to my safety beam sensor, I was able to basically use a couple of those leads and tap into that here. So if you don't already have that, you might have to run a wire to do this. But all I've got to do is put those two leads from the wired sensor to the in terminals. And then we'll set it up in the firmware to use both the optical sensor and the wired sensor in conjunction to determine if the garage is open or closed, which makes it a little bit more reliable and instantaneous when the state is changing. Now, you might not be so lucky to have an extra pair of wires that you can simply tap into from the bottom of the garage. So there's another place where we can install the sensor that's a bit easier. Let me show you. Okay, so I think probably there's a number of places where you can install a heavy-duty magnetic contact sensor like this, but probably the simplest, since we have the GDO White mounted on the ceiling, is to install it here at the top of the door. So I'm just going to demonstrate quickly. I'm not going to actually install it, but if you put the wired side here like this, and then mount the magnet on the moving part of the door. Let's see. Like this. And you'll have to play with it to make sure that it's not going to block anything when the door moves. Then this will make enough contact when the garage door is closed, and then you can simply run a wire up the ceiling to your GDO White like that. All right, if you are adding a wired sensor, we now need to update the firmware settings to taking that into account. So I'm going to go into settings and then open and close detection method. By default, it's only using the built-in optical sensor, which we calibrated at the first step. So if that's all you need, then you don't have to change anything. If you want to use a wired sensor instead of the optical sensor, you can choose this option. In my case, I'm going to use both. So I'm going to set it to both, and then that way it will use both the wired sensor and the optical sensor as inputs. There are some advanced settings here to kind of change the sensitivity and margin of error and things like that. I'm not going to go into the details of this, but you can look at our knowledge base for a description of these different settings. So I'll change that setting to both. Once we're done messing with our settings, then we hit save and continue. And then I'm going to see a summary of my settings here, and then build now. And what's happening next is we're making a customized firmware for your device and building that on our infrastructure. And that takes 5 or 10 minutes. And then once that's ready, then we'll update the firmware on the device using the app, and you'll be able to, and then those settings will ultimately take effect. And if you're connecting to Home Assistant and you've enabled encryption, you can copy the encryption key here and paste it into Home Assistant. I'll show you guys that in a second.